Hello and welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. I know if you tune in on a regular basis, you hear how excited I am for our next guest, and it can probably sound very cliche and a bit rote, but I'm telling you, I am really excited about our guest today. And part of the reason is because in our conversation off air, she told me that as a professional and a clinician, when it comes to giving care, one of the most important things to her is to not deny people the beauty of hope. And I'm sure that we can all testify to experiences that we've had with professionals that are giving care where that is missing. So that is not her belief. It's the exact opposite. We're going to have a great experience with us here today on Just Two Dads. Again, welcome to Just Two Dads. I want to thank Billy Footwear, our partner in Thrive. Billy Footwear is the maker of adaptive footwear for all. The story of the founder, Billy Price, is one that is of amazing and immeasurable value. He had a traumatic accident, became paralyzed, learned how to do everything for himself with the exception of putting his shoes on. A prototype was created, and Billy Footwear was born. And they have sold over 1 million shoes, helped countless people. And if you click on the link, which will be in the show notes, you will get a discount off of the final purchase of your shoes from them. Our guest today is someone who comes to us having created SarahCare. This is someone who is beyond passionate about caregiving and has lived the experience herself, has a book about it and the journey and everything, and we will be talking about that. Welcome to Just Two Dads, Merle Griff. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Sean, for having me. And thank you for those sharing the story about hope. I really appreciate that.
I do too, and I think that everyone within the sound of our voice will also. So let's start with tell us about SarahCare, what it does, how it came to be, and exactly who and what SarahCare is.
Actually, Sarah is an acronym. Everyone wants me to tell them a wonderful story that it came from a family member, but it's actually an acronym. It stands for Senior Adult Recreation and Health. And
Ah,
actually, I got into caring for seniors through my work with children. My area
mhm.
specialty was 3 to 12-year-olds. I was a play therapist and started working with developing therapeutic techniques for parents. And then I had grandparents who basically said, "What about me? I'm important too, and I'm involved in the family." And they were right. And so worked my way through the lifespan into work with seniors. Sarah Care is adult day health centers. We're in 13 states. Um,
Mm.
we're we say 101 activities and home by dinner because people come to us during the day. We have nurses on staff. We do personal care. We have people in wheelchairs and walkers, but they have a great time. They have friends. They have great food. They have fun. They're getting out of their house. And they're meeting people and they're with people. And as you know, that whole issue of social isolation is a big issue. And they do
Yeah.
that under the care of our nurses. So it's a
Wow.
great, great thing. Part of our centers we own, and part of our centers are franchise centers. And so we're always looking for new people and new franchisees who want to join us in SarahCare. That's what we
Wow.
do.
And you know, as much as I had been doing before, taking a look at the site, I didn't know that until just now, and I've seen the testimonials on the site. And for those that are listening versus seeing us, it is Sarah, SarahCare, CARE.com, SarahCare.com. That is that's quite ambitious and impressive. So, where you said you're in? Did you say you're in multiple states? Whereabouts then?
We're primarily in the Northeast, Southeast, and the Midwest, although we also have centers in Texas.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, so you're doing great work. You know, a person doesn't get into the business of any kind of care because money is the first thing that they want to their first priority, especially when it comes to caring for those who are disabled or aged or whatever the case might be. So tell us a little bit about your story, because you know, one of the first qualifications for being a superhero is to think that you are not one. And so I already know you well enough to know from our brief interaction that you've met that qualification. But you've also met the qualification because of the level of value that you add on a growing scale. So tell us a little bit about you, where you come from geographically, spiritually, emotionally, and things like that, because that has everything to do with the path that you take professionally.
Wow. Well, I come from Philadelphia. I'm
Hmm.
a Philly girl.
Hmm.
I came from a very, not large, but a very, very engaged family. You know, every Sunday we were either at one grandparent's house or another grandparent's house, and all the
Hmm.
cousins were there. And we all had a great time.
That's
I'm sure
everything.
driving all the adults really crazy, with all our noise and tumult and everything. Um, my Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So, I had really good parents. I mean, everyone always wants to hear the story of I had a terrible childhood and it was really horrible, and all this pain and suffering you had, and fortunately or unfortunately, I came from a very close, loving family with a father who played with us a lot, and it was a very strong family that I came from.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. Was there anyone else that was into um, that was a caregiver of any kind that influenced your decision to take that path?
What really happened, how I got really into this, is I had a summer job as a counselor in a camp for exceptional children.
Mm,
And for some reason, I was given the group of children who were, in those days, they were called emotionally disturbed as opposed to behaviorally challenged or behaviorally
right.
handicapped.
Hmm.
And there was a psychiatrist who came and worked with us and trained us on how to work with the kids. And I don't know, I fell in love with it and I decided that was my calling. I mean, I
Hmm.
came from a family where everybody cared for each other. There was no
Right.
question about that. But in terms of becoming a professional life, I really fell into it really accidentally. And I believe um, it was a path that was laid out for me.
Mm,
And maybe that sounds, I don't know, maybe that sounds strange to people, but I really do believe I'm a spiritual person, and I really do believe that sometimes these things are laid out for you to
right.
walk a certain pathway. And
Right.
it's been great. It's been a terrific ride for me.
Wow. I don't think that sounds strange at all. I believe in that. I was having a conversation with some family just yesterday. We were talking about the whole idea of the dark prospect of that this is all there is, which makes death and departure an even more bleak picture.
Hmm.
And I was talking about the fact that, we have to pay attention to the things that are around us, messages, signs, things of that nature. Because we can get so caught up in this world, especially with these, now as I hold my phone up, you know, get distracted and sucked
Right.
into believing that this is all there is. And I think that listening is just as important as making conscious decisions and choices. So
Mhm.
you so the summer program that you were in, where you were inspired to take that path, was that in high school then?
Uh, yeah, I was a junior and senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but things happen, Sean, through your life. I mean, one of my children had a really significant learning disability.
Mm-hmm.
The short version of that story is the psychologist who tested him told us that if we were lucky and fortunate, perhaps he could grow up to work at a gas station. Not that working in a gas station is a bad thing; it's an honorable job. But that's what he told us. He said, "Don't
That there's
expect
a
any
limit.
more. That's it. That's all he's ever going to be able to do." My That son is now a licensed psychologist. He does work all over the world with military active and veterans and um, first responders. He has 12 therapists working for him. So much for that.
For him. I didn't get to tell you this because in our show, in our conversation prepping for today, we've only communicated by text since. But without knowing what the answer is, you've made me feel that it's more within reach. And the question that I'm referring to is, what is our son going to do? He's 19. He was diagnosed with autism at 3. And sometimes I feel like we need to know exactly what it is he's going to do. He graduated high school 2 years ago. He's in a, well, 2 years, yeah. He's in an adult program now, working his way through that. But he's looking for purpose. And you want to see his anxiety relieved by knowing, okay, this is what he's going to do. This is the path that he's going to take. And your words in terms of hope for your patients and your clients and your experience with your son just lets me know that the belief that it's there is just as important as knowing what the exact answer is. So
Mhm.
I want to thank you for that because we've been going through that with him, trying to figure out, okay, what is it that he's going to do.
And you don't always know,
Yeah.
and sometimes it changes. I mean, the way I really came to that about that issue with hope really was through the care of my mother. And
Hmm.
I think I shared that with you. She had a very, very dense stroke. She went for a while into a neurological rehab center. She was being discharged, and I was taking her into my home to care for her in my home. And the speech therapist, as the kids say, got in my face and told me, listen, you better adjust. You better come into reality. Your mother's never going to speak again. Your mother's never going to walk again. Your mother's never going to eat again. I mean, it was like never, 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 never.
But she's
Um,
in your home telling you this.
well, in the neuro rehab center where my
Yeah,
mother was
yeah.
being, and I said to her, at this very moment, I realized, I said, you know what, that's your opinion and you're welcome to it. But I come from a different place where at SarahCare we say, we'll try. We'll try. You never know. We'll try.
Right.
And the
Well, so
fact
at
that,
this point, you already had SarahCare.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
at that
Okay.
point,
Okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
But
Wow.
and so I just said to her, when you take away hope from people, I don't know how people get through the day,
Yeah.
and it's a terrible thing that you're doing. Yeah, it
Oh,
was.
you told her that.
Oh, I did tell her that. Unfortunately, yes, I can be very blunt when it comes to caregiving. And yes,
Yeah.
I didn't want her doing to other people what she had done to me. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I-
Because not everybody is prepared for that. Because it's one thing for you to hear that, acknowledge it. You're selling people short. That's horrible. Other people will just take that and accept it as fact. That's a really, really grave abuse of the position that she's been given. So let's go back a little bit and talk about. So you went from your high school at the summer program. You know that you then want to work with children. It seems like, and it seems like you head off to college, and that's kind of the direction that you
Mhm.
started. And tell us about that, going from education to first working with children outside of that summer program.
Well, actually, my first professional job with children was with children who were blind, and also at that point, what they called emotionally disturbed. It was at the
Wow.
what they call the Western Pennsylvania School for Blind Children.
Wow.
Um, and I learned a lot. First of all, I learned a lot about mobility and operating in a world without vision, and how you can do that. But I also learned a lot about kids and the types of situations they came from and the kind of neglect and abuse that they were living with. And we lived with those kids. We worked around the clock with them.
Mm.
It's what we call residential settings. And that was
Oh,
really
like at a group home, sort of.
yeah, it was. It was a very interesting position because at that point, kids were not mainstreamed. And the Western Pennsylvania School for Blind Children, all the children there were blind, but they were all, so to say, normal. So
Hmm.
our kids in our unit were the only kids who had behavioral challenges. And the rest of the staff did not want these kids there. And so they
Really?
ostracized us. Um, they wouldn't talk to us. We got little breaks to go have dinner. They didn't want to sit with us. It was a real eye opening experience about in not being tolerant and prejudice. Um,
Mm,
yeah, but it was a great job. I really learned a lot and spent a couple of years after that in residential, what was called residential treatment centers,
hmm.
including a state hospital ward for adolescents. So I finally went into community mental health as a play therapist,
Wow.
which I
It's
love.
interesting because we can easily forget about people that are in situations that on the surface don't have anything to do with us. And that goes back to just being seen and heard and, you know, thinking of other people's situation, having some level of empathy. So did you say as a play therapist?
Yes, yeah. So that is a specific technique. You have to take an extra year of training in that.
Hmm.
Um, but what I did was I developed a technique called family play therapy, where
Hmm.
it was only 10 sessions where I taught parents how to play with their children and
Mm,
the importance of play, and how play could even be used as a behavioral technique. So I would say to parents, what did you like to play when you were a kid? And we would talk
mhm.
about that. And then we would
Wow.
replicate that in the play therapy room. Because in the end, kids don't really care what they're playing. They just
Hmm.
want to be with you and they want to
Yeah.
play with you, and be with
Wow.
and so it was 10 sessions. Parents were uncomfortable, often very,
Hmm.
very uncomfortable. But it
Right.
got to the point where they became comfortable, and they could use it. They could say to a child, I have to do this right now. I'm going to set the timer. Those in the old days, right? When it
Hmm.
goes off, then I promise you I will play with you. And kids
Wow.
would respond to that. And they would say, okay, and they would be quiet or occupy themselves or watch TV or do homework or whatever it is they had to do,
Uh-huh.
because they knew when that timer went off, they would have their parents' attention.
Wow. How long did you do that?
Oh, for many years, many many years. Yeah,
Wow. And this was before and leading into SarahCare?
right. Because what led me into that was, um, I had an opportunity, in a geriatric building years and years and years ago to do what we now call intergenerational programs.
Hmm.
So,
What is that?
well, it's combining seniors with children, and
Oh, what of that?
right, so that they form relationships. This is not that
Hmm.
the kids come in for Halloween and prance around, and then the seniors are like, "Oh, how adorable!" Right, and then they
Right.
leave. All right, this is
Right.
really building relationships. Um, and so I had an opportunity, but in order to do that, I had to build at that point my first adult day center. So I went back, got some additional training, additional certification in gerontology, and opened up one of the first what's called shared intergenerational sites in the country.
Mm,
And we did great work there. We had everything from Rockababies, which was seniors who were physically able to go into the children's daycare center and spend time one on one with the infants and rock them, all
mhm.
the way through to college. It was a great program. What was surprising to me is that most of the participants in the Rocket Babies program were men,
Uh,
not women.
really
Uh-huh.
interesting.
I did not expect that. But the men told us, they're like, look, when we were young, you worked two jobs or you worked long hours or whatever,
Mhm.
and the culture was different. Now things have changed. And now I'm
Right,
retired
right.
time. And, I think I'd like to try rocking those babies. Like, okay.
You know what I just thought of too with you is that you're so unpretentious, though I know that you appreciate respect. I, edified you and introduced you and welcomed you as, Merle Griff. And for those that are watching the show, when people sign in, you actually put in the way that you prefer to be addressed, and you have Merle Griff. I know so many people that would be like, that's doctor to you. I earned that title. And I sold you short because I did not introduce you as Dr. Merle Griff, and you
Well,
deserve that.
well, thank you. It's
So
okay.
tell me something about that personally, because almost anyone I know that has a title of doctor, medical PhD, whatever the case might be, because either because they still have so much missing, or because they put in so much to get it, they are very adamant about being addressed with that title. I have a family member once that we had a family gathering, and um, he had graduated med school and everything, and one of our uncles called the house looking for him, and he called saying, "I'm looking for Dr. So and so." So that tells you how within certain families that's a big deal. Where does that stand with you? Because I find that so refreshing.
Um, I I mean, I went and got a doctoral degree, and I was older when I went and got my doctoral degree. I mean, my
Mhm,
oldest son was in college, the kids were in high school, um,
mhm.
but I was doing a lot of research and a lot of work, and I always had to have a PhD with me on the grant.
Uh-huh.
Had a close friend, mentor, former professor said to me, "Aren't you getting tired of this already? I mean, you just need to go back and get your degree and stop this already, so that you stop giving away all these ideas you have. But in order
Mhm.
to do that, you're going to need your union card." That's what she called it. And your
Right.
union card is going to be a doctoral degree. Um,
Wow.
so I said, fine. And that's what I did. When I think back now, I don't know that I would have the energy. You know, I had kids, I was working, and I was getting a doctoral degree. And
Mhm.
I don't know that I would have the energy at this point in my life to do that. But at that point, it was really important to me.
Wow.
It also led into some interesting exchanges between me and my children. I mean, at a doctoral level, your papers need to be like a minimum of 25 pages. You have to do
Mhm.
research. And I was on the computer when my oldest son was in college. He called me. He knew I would be up working.
Uh-huh.
It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I said, this paper is driving me crazy. It's 23 pages. It really has to be 25 pages. He said, "Mom, change the font." I said, "What?" I can change the font? He's like, "Yes, use Courier New." I'm like, "Really?" So I changed the
You know
font.
what? That's a great book title for a book that is about just changing your perspective on anything. Change the font.
That's true. That
Yeah,
would
it,
be
it really is.
you're absolutely
You know,
right.
as we're sitting here too, I don't know if anybody can hear if it's going to come out in the recording, hear any murmuring or anything like that. I don't usually record this late in the day, and my son is home, so he's upstairs scripting and everything. I hear him every now and then, but it's one of the things that we always say that with this show we make it as real as possible. So
Mhm.
it just in case anybody heard that, that's what that is. But
Right.
that's really fascinating though. Just change the font. Wow, that's that's something else. So it's one
So
thing, and I'm always fast. No, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say what that reminds me of is I talk to people sometimes about mantras, that you
Uh-huh.
have to have a personal mantra that helps you get through the day. All right.
Mhm.
And people, of course, will say, "Well, what's your mantra, Meryl?" And I say, "Temporary inconvenience for permanent improvement."
There you
That's my
go.
mantra. And they're
There you
like, "Wow,
go.
that's really deep. Where did you get that from? I mean, did you think of that yourself?" And I say, "No, actually, the truth of the matter is it was a construction sign on the Pennsylvania Turnpike that I thought was really great."
That's something else. Wow.
So you
So
never
I'm
know.
always fascinated by people that, and I wonder, like, because when you go to med school or you get your PhD and you open a practice, you're not going to business school, so they don't necessarily teach you how to run a business.
Mhm.
Tell me something from a business standpoint, what that was kind of like in terms of preparing, because again, it's one thing to work at a facility. It's like I'm going to
Right.
open one of my own. It's a totally different thing to say, I'm going to open several of them, and then I'm going to provide an opportunity on top of that for others to do the same thing should they want to earn income by adding value to others. That's super ambitious, and I'm just fascinated by that. Tell me about that.
Well, I was very, very fortunate. My father was a commercial interior designer, but he also had retail stores. And I literally went to work for him when I was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was a stock girl and I was this, and then I mean, I learned to run a business from my father.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, so it was unbelievable training for me.
Mm.
And of course, I then took some additional courses, but basically, I learned to run a business from my father. I learned how to treat my staff and interact with my employees and customer service and all of that from my dad. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. I love that. So then, what is the gap like, time wise? Chronologically, spiritually, emotionally, and everything from the idea of opening your first location to actually doing it. Actually, let me back up. I always have this habit of asking these compound questions, and people are like, wait a minute, which one do I do with first? So let me back up. What were you doing professionally when you thought, I want to open a location and a facility of my own? That's the first question.
Well, I was operating as a play therapist,
Mm.
and I had developed a technique that included grandparents into the play therapy situation.
Ah, okay.
What I done was what was happening was in the families I was working with anyway,
Hmm.
parents were changing. They were changing their discipline techniques, they were changing their communication techniques, they were changing. And
Hmm.
grandparents, although they were caring and they meant well, were undermining that because a
Mm.
parent would say, no, 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 Dr. Merle said we're going to do it this way and not that way. And at that point, a grandmother especially would feel undermined and feel as though even though I didn't know her at the time, I was being critical of her and critical of her mothering and her parenting. So I had
Right.
to find a way to engage the grandparents. And so I
Hmm.
developed this technique where I basically changed their role. So the grandparents became kind of like my co therapist. And when they came in to the therapy room, instead of
Hmm.
saying, oh, like, how was your week? All right, kind of thing, I would
Hmm.
say, what went well this week? Tell me what really happened that was really great. And that would force them, all right, to be the bearer of the good news.
Right.
And it also forced everybody to see the positive as opposed to the negative. It's amazing how changing a question can
Hmm.
force someone to change their frame of mind.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and so I, and so the architect for this particular site came to me and said, I know you're kind of working with grandparents. We're going to have this child daycare center. We have the space on the other side. What do you think we can do with it? And I said, gee, I had done some intergenerational work in Pittsburgh. I'd love to duplicate that. And he said, well, how are we going to do that? And I said, well, it's a relatively new concept, but we could open up an adult daycare center. And when I think back on it, I think, oh my gosh, you know, I had, I had never done that before.
Right.
Um, and it was a little risky. But
Hmm.
that's how I started in my work. That's how I opened up my first SarahCare center. Yeah.
Wow. That's something else. And I think it embodies the idea that sometimes we feel like we have to know too much. You climb a mountain, and when you get to the top, you look back, you look down, and you're like, oh my gosh, look at what we accomplished. If you
Mhm.
look on the way up, you could think you're way right out of climbing up there.
Right. Right. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
and that's often what people do. I mean, you're absolutely right, Sean. They're too busy looking at and evaluate everything that can go wrong. At some
yeah,
point,
yeah.
it's in sailing. We say at some point you have to get your head out of the boat. All right,
Hmm.
you
Yeah,
gotta
yeah.
go look around. You got to figure out where you're going, and you just got to go at some
Right,
point.
right. Yeah, yeah. I think we underestimate the value that we can bring, and we overestimate the importance of the right time.
Right. Well, it also has to do with children. I mean, it's one of the things I talk about in the book is, not allowing children to fail. I mean, we're all, we're good, devoted, loving parents. And so we don't want to see
Right.
our children suffer. We don't want to see them fail. And I understand that. But when children fail and you give them the skills to get over it and to get through it and to handle it, then they have a confidence in themselves the next time they fail or the next time they make a
Hmm.
mistake. They have confidence in themselves that they can handle it, that they can go on. When they never
Right.
fail and you always cover for them as a parent,
Hmm.
they never gain that
Yeah.
confidence in themselves. Um,
Right.
and they stay very dependent on you. I'm sorry. I guess I had that was my little soapbox for this for the
No, don't
podcast.
be, don't be, don't be. Matter of fact, tell us about the book. It can be found on Amazon. I'm going to show that on the screen as well. But the book is entitled "Solace in the Storm." Solace in the Storm: Caring for Loved Ones of Every Generation. Now, the fact that that's the part that is so valuable there, caring for loved ones of every generation. Tell us about the genesis, because the other thing that I want in terms of adding value and inspiring others is there's someone listening that is thinking about starting a business of their own. There's someone that has a dream about a business that adds value. There's someone that has a book in them, wonders if anybody might care what they might have to say. So tell us how the book came to be, and then let's talk about the book itself.
It really came from my own personal family caregiving experiences.
Mhm.
Um, my children, taking care of my mother in my own home after her stroke, taking care of my husband, who had a chronic illness for many years until he passed away.
I'm
And I
sorry.
developed some very strong feelings about the kind of information that family caregivers receive, um,
Hmm.
and that it just doesn't work. If one more psychologist told me, and I'm a psychologist, so I shouldn't say this, but if one more psychologist told me to own the feelings, or you have to take care of yourself. The impulse is just, to be honest, just to slap them, because you say to yourself, how the heck can I take care of myself? Do you have any idea what I'm doing and what I'm dealing with? So I wrote
Right.
the book to give people things that I found I could do that were successful. That took me 5, 10, 15 minutes. That's it. Because
Mm.
that's all the time you have in your day. When
Right.
you're caregiving,
Right.
you don't have an hour to meditate. All right. You
Right.
know,
Right.
you don't have $500 to join a gym. You just don't. All right.
Right.
So these were things that you could do quickly, or things that you could do to make a difference. So if you're dealing with family members who are very
Hmm.
negative to you, or people who are very negative to you, or you're having trouble communicating with your teenager, or it's adult children with whom you're having issues, these are kind of quick, easy tips that have worked, and have worked for a lot of people, to help you through that. And I did it through multiple generations, because most of us are taking care of multiple generations. We have our
Exactly.
children or our grandchildren, or we have, our parents or our spouses. So it's like I can't read three different things because I'm dealing with three different generations. And so I wrote the book to allow people who are dealing with multiple generations to just go to that chapter that pertains to them.
I
And
think that's huge because the several things, the multiple generations, and then I didn't interject because I wanted to say I was wondering what you were going to say, because people have talked about, you know, there's a saying that says, who motivates the motivator, who's going to refuel the person that gives fuel, who cares for the caregiver, all those things. So I knew that it makes sense to say you got to take care of yourself. You know, you got to put your oxygen mask on first. And you answered it perfectly, talking about the things that most people can't realistically go out and do. But everybody can do something in short minutes, in bite-sized pieces
Mhm.
that add up over a period of time. That's something that I think any and everyone should know about. And I had it on the screen. It's Solace in the Storm, caring for loved ones of every generation. It is available wherever you get books, including but not limited to Amazon. And so we're going to make sure that we have that in the show notes as well, because that's something that should be promoted and everybody should know. That's huge and immeasurable, because if you even think about the fact that the family that I was with yesterday, I was sharing with one of them that despite the fact that our son is 19, I have accepted that my wife and I are caregivers. My acceptance of that term, or associating myself or us with that term, is only about maybe 3 years old. And it's because I just thought of caregiving as someone who's caring for the elderly. We have this great relationship with an organization called Caring Across Generations. Um, did an interview with the founder, Ajin Poo, and I was talking about the need to redefine how we in America define caregiving anyway. So if we don't define it accurately, how are we then supposed to possibly support it?
Mhm.
And when you think about it, you're so busy doing what you do, you just you don't define yourself as a caregiver. You're just being a dutiful son or daughter or a parent. And
Mhm.
then you're so busy doing that, you don't even realize the things that you need to do to be able to take care of yourself as well. And for your book to be able to do something like that in these short pieces, it's tremendous. That's just huge. And I think where we are right now, especially as a society, that matters a whole lot. Because I don't think we're at least, and I'd like to know what you think about this. Statistically, you hear that culturally in other countries, the elderly are more revered, cared for, and things of that sort. How true do you think that is?
I can tell you the fastest growing industry right now in China and Japan is nursing homes,
Mm,
assisted
wow.
livings. Um, they're dealing with a reality. They have one child families, um,
Right.
and they just can't continue to take care of people. So I think that dignity and respect and revering seniors does not necessarily mean that if they need a higher level of care, then they need to receive that care. And you can look, look, many professionals wanted me to put my mother in a nursing home and they wanted me to put my husband in a nursing home. I was
Mhm.
extremely fortunate, all right, because I do what I do. I was able to get people to help me within my home. But if I
Mhm.
did something else and I didn't have the knowledge that I have and I didn't have the experience that I've had, they needed a pretty high level of care and it would not have
Mhm.
been safe for them um, to be at home.
Right.
So I think that you can revere and respect and give dignity to people in a varieties of settings, in a variety of ways. There's not one way to do it. There are multiple ways
Right.
to do
Definitely, definitely. I think that's fantastic to know. And as you're saying that, it makes me think of something like long-term care. That's something that is very, very expensive on a standalone as a
it.
standalone service or policy. And in my work in financial services, I've seen it and I know how valuable something like that is as, say, a rider or an extra feature on a life insurance policy versus a standalone one. And it kind of dovetails with what I've always said, which is for anyone who's, just going through Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you might be on, you hear about this show and you hear caregiving and special needs and things like that, and it is just foreign to you because it hasn't affected you personally. If you're blessed with a remotely long life, you're going to get membership into our community. It's either going to be temporary because of an injury or illness of your own, it's going to be caring for someone else, or it's going to be someone taking care of you because you've now aged. And it's just one of those things that connects us all, just like death, being seen, the need to be loved, and all those things that just matter and are a wonderful but challenging part of the human experience.
Right. But I think, Sean, what you said before was very true, and that is a parent of a young child is a caregiver. A parent of a
Hmm.
teenager is a caregiver. Um,
Hmm.
they have the same stresses and the same issues that someone has that's taking care of a senior.
Yeah,
They have to deal with family members and they have to deal with professionals, and it's many of the same issues. And So they shortchange themselves by not seeing themselves as a caregiver, because that's what you
definitely.
are. When you're
Yeah,
with
exactly.
someone else, you are a caregiver. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking with someone the other day. If you there's I know someone that has a neighbor that they don't necessarily get along with, and this person continues to take the high road while the neighbor does not. And I was thinking the other day, I was like, that's a form of caregiving, actually. I mean, because you're looking out for the care of the neighbor as well as preserving yourself by not going to the gutter where that person might. I think that it goes back to us needing to redefine what that term means. And I think that in one way, just with our respect for each other as human beings, you know, there's a level of caregiving that we give to each other on a daily basis if we're doing it right.
Right. I mean, one of the things I talk about in the book is how to accept help and how to ask for help. Because regardless of the age or ages of the people that you're caring for, that's always an
Hmm.
issue. Someone says, "Oh, can I help you?" And the answer is always, "No, no, no, I'm fine. I have it under control." All right.
Hmm.
When there are people who do want to help, they just need to find a way and know a way in which to help. And so I talk about that in the book, about things like
Yeah.
making a list of things that
Hmm.
would really help you.
Yeah.
And, so that when someone asks, you have an answer for them.
Hmm. Yeah. It seems like people are either on one end of the spectrum where they want help with everything because they've given up and feel sorry for themselves, or they don't accept any because they see it as a sign of weakness. But the other thing that takes place is when, and I've seen this with my own eyes, is when having your independence in a given situation matters and is important. But by the same token, when you deny someone the opportunity to help you, especially if it's something that genuinely can help you, you deny them the feeling that they get from contributing and being able to help. And sometimes people need that as much as anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I was speaking to a woman recently who's taking care of her husband who now has dementia of Alzheimer's
Hmm.
type. And
Hmm.
she was saying that her son lives in California. All right.
Hmm.
She's living in the Midwest. He's living in California. And she
Yeah.
said he feels really bad because he wants to help, but he's living in California, and he has a business, and so his ability to travel to the Midwest to help her care is very, very limited. I was listening
Hmm.
to her, and I said, well, her name is not Betty, but we'll call her Betty. I said, Betty, weren't we talking a couple of weeks ago, and you were telling me how overwhelmed you are in taking care of your financial issues because your husband always did that, and now you have to do it, and you're not used to it. And she
Hmm.
said, yes, I am overwhelmed by that. And I said, Betty, isn't your son an accountant? And she's like, yeah, he is. And
Just
I
never thought of it.
I said, "Well, don't you think he could help you with some of this?" And she's like, "Oh, do you think he would?" And I said, "Well, he keeps telling you that he feels so bad and he wants to find a way to help you. I don't
Hmm.
know, but perhaps you ought to have that discussion with him."
Yeah.
And as it turns out, he was thrilled. That was a way for him to help her. And
Hmm.
even though he was a long distance,
Wow.
her.
That goes back to what we were saying again about someone being so busy being a caregiver that they didn't even know that that's what they were. Einstein used to say that it is said that he said, um, you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness at which it occurs. And so I've always said, if we paid property taxes for the real estate under our nose, it'd be the most expensive property tax on the planet because so many times the answer is right there. We're so in the middle of it that we don't see it. It's the most obvious thing. Neither one of them thought of that.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is something else. So what is the future for SarahCare? And is there something you want to do until you physically can't do it anymore, just because it's work you want to do versus have to do? Is it going to be eventually taken over by your children, anything like that? What does that look like? What kind of goals do you have?
Um, I don't think it's going to be taken over by my children. I mean, my children have worked in my business starting when they were very young kids.
Hmm.
Um, but they have other professions and other jobs, and I don't see that happening. Right now, I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, and what we're doing is we're expanding our programs and our services.
That's
Um,
great.
so I think we're pretty good at looking at the niche, like where do people need programs and services that they're not receiving. And
Right.
we develop those programs and services to really help them.
Hmm.
And I have fun doing that. I like to do that.
Right.
So
Wow.
I may not stay in the same position that I'm in.
Mhm.
I may, turn over the CEO position to someone in 3 to 4 years, but I don't know. I mean, I also, as a therapist, I also have some children's books I'm in the midst of writing.
That's
So
fantastic.
my way segueing kind of into
Hmm.
that. It,
Wow.
I, so I'm not, I have, I certainly am at the age where I have lots of friends who have retired, and they're like,
Hmm.
Merle, come on, you need to retire. And I don't, they're really good, wonderful people, and I love them dearly. So I don't want to insult them by saying things like, oh my God, if my week consisted of playing mahjong and canasta 4 times a week, I would kill myself. You know, I mean, that's great. I'm glad you're happy. Good for you.
Good for
But
you.
it's just sure at some point I'm going to be there. All right. At some point I'm going to be
Right.
like, oh, please, I want to wake up in the morning and go play cards. I'm sure that's going to be there, but it's not there yet. So,
It's
yeah.
not there. That's
Right
not
now we're
you.
continuing to expand. We're bringing on new franchisees. We're helping them open.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
So
how.
that's,
So how many franchisees would you say, new franchisees would you say there are on an annual basis usually?
it's 5 to 10 on an annual basis.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's okay. Now let me ask you this, just from a business standpoint. Again, it's one thing you're a mom and pop, brick and mortar, one location, but when you start, for a franchise to be successful, you need franchisees. Did you develop that portion of it? How did that come to be? Because the experience you had with your dad wasn't in a franchise business, I don't think. So how did you? Because there's people listening that are like, I got a great idea, I'd like to do that. Or there's people that have a franchise and are like, I don't have any new franchisees. How did you get to that point?
I actually literally read an article about franchising that came from my law firm, came from my lawyer out of, one of these
Hmm.
pre-printed things. And I thought about it and I thought, you know what? I think adult day health is going to be the next new thing that people are going to do. And I don't
Yeah.
want it to be like some assisted livings where basically it's a real estate deal. And
Hmm.
so the care is not good.
Right.
They're taking care of people they should not be taking care of. The standards of care are not where they need to be.
Hmm.
And I kind of had this vision that in franchising, we could bring in people who really wanted to serve seniors, keep families together, help families stay together as long as possible. But we could, in effect, impart education and knowledge to them to teach them how to do it to the highest standard of care. Um,
Wow.
and I've been very, very blessed because my franchisees are really wonderful people and they all run unbelievable centers and they take really good care of people. We do screen pretty carefully, but yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. So we've got it on the screen again. I went to the franchise opportunities page at sarahcare.com. If that's something you're interested in, you're looking to start a business and add value, consider taking a look at that. That is, I'm just so glad that we've been able to have this time that we've had here today. And we're at the portion of the show where we ask the following: our ability to change the world is based on our ability or our willingness to change ourselves. So, with that said, give us just one example or of a thought or a belief that you once believed strongly, but no longer believe to be true.
Well, John, I think this is going to shock you. And after all of this, no, it's true. So I have always tried to be a good person and a kind person and a caring
Mm-hmm.
person. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it doesn't always work out.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're dealing with people who you have to set boundaries for, and you have to set
Mm-hmm.
limits for, and you have to tell them no. And I'm
Right.
not going to continue to put myself in this position anymore. And this is going to stop. Um, and that was really hard for me,
Mm-hmm.
very, very hard for me. But I've learned that you have, with certain times, with certain people, you just have to do that. You have to set
Mm-hmm.
those boundaries and those limits. I'm sure that's not what you expected to hear from me.
I didn't, but at the same time, I feel like we're all like sponges. The only way you would have really surprised me is if you didn't have an answer, because you
Oh,
don't strike me as someone that isn't evolving. I saw something earlier today and it said, stay away from still people, people that are still complaining, still unhappy, still broke, still this, still that. And that means so much because there's no wrong answer to that question, right? If your answer is, I used to like anchovies on my pizza and I don't, hey, that's not deep evolution, but growth is growth. Now, if your answer is, well, I'm 30 years old and I don't have a belief that I believe strongly and I've changed my mind, then it just means that while you're still breathing, there's things to think about. I think that question is something that is valuable and worthy for us to ask ourselves on a daily basis almost as we continue to grow. So, and if someone is like yourself, went from sort of a pleasing experience to realizing that, wait a minute, I got to value me too. That
mhm.
happens. Yeah,
Right. I mean,
definitely.
I do talk about that in the book. It happens to young mothers who get, I had a professor who used to say the worst enemy of a mother of a toddler is another mother of another toddler.
Mm, mm-hmm,
I mean, I talk about my experience in a play group where another mother who was also a psychologist was like, "Oh, have you tested your son yet?" And I've tested my daughter, and she's already testing at a genius level. And why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? And you should be doing this, and you should be doing that. Oh my gosh, these kids were 2 and 3 years old. I mean, come on,
mm-hmm.
all right. But I was
Yeah.
completely cowed by that completely, and thought,
Wow.
I'm not a good mom, and oh, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. Oh my gosh. And similar experiences through my lifetime finally came to the point where I realized that not with a lot of people, but with some people, you have to say, thank you very much. But I choose to continue down my own path.
Yeah,
But
you do have to guard your space, and comparison is the devil's work, especially in this day and age with social media.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
definitely, definitely.
absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time here today. I want to thank everyone within the sound of my voice. Thank you for supporting the show over these years. The show is just two dads. As you see, there's just one here. We're going through some evolution and changes with the show. And you know, Brian is going to be back on another episode, and I want to thank everyone that supported us from day one. Make sure that you go out and check out the website, SarahCare.com, and then the book is Solace in the Storm, and it can be found on Amazon or wherever you get books. Thanks again to Billy Footwear and makers of adaptive footwear. And then, if you or someone you know is a male who happens to be a dad and or a caregiver to someone with special needs, disabilities, or a diagnosis, and you feel like you don't have a place to voice your opinions or even raise your hand and say that you're uncertain, feel free to join us for our men's group known as The Den. We meet bi weekly on Zoom. That will also be in the show notes. Registration is free of charge. Um, and just keep in mind that we should try and remain a little more childlike, less childish. Everybody needs to be seen, needs to be heard, needs to know that they matter, and that they loved, that they are loved. With everyone within the sound of my voice, thank you so much. And Morel, again, thank you so much for your time
Oh,
today.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Just Two Dads.